is the Amadon Planet Podcast, episode 27. I am your host, Joel Amadon. Thank you for joining me on this never-ending quest to figure out how to teach better. And I got to tell you, I'm a little bit nervous today recording this intro and outro to the podcast because I had a chance to interview Andrew Ratcliffe for this episode. And Andrew Ratcliffe is the CEO of Tweed Recording Audio Production School located in Athens, Georgia, and he teaches this sort of thing, like how to accurately capture sound, and mostly capturing it with regards to the playing of music, but they also talk about podcasts and audio recordings of all sorts. And the reason why I have Andrew on the podcast is I kind of heard about this idea of this audio production school a long time ago. He and I used to go to church together when he was in Oxford, Mississippi, and where this idea of this school kind of came to start to percolate, and we'd have some conversations because he knew I was into teaching teachers, and he was thinking about how does he take his expertise in recording, where he's got tons of expertise in that area, and how does he take some of the informal teaching he's doing and put it into a curriculum, put it into a whole school where they can develop certificate programs and whatnot to teach people how to do this well, how to capture sound, and what are the things you need to put into place. And even then, thinking about all the aspects of teaching that he thinks about with regards to his production school. So able to talk about it before he moved, and then seeing some of the things from social media on the kind of the creation, the evolution of Tweed Recording Audio Production School. And so I'm excited to hear the lessons that he learned and the question he had that we captured in this interview. And so I'm glad to share that with you, because this is another episode in that Create series that started in the beginning of 2020 when we talked about the Broken Record podcast, Rick Rubin and Malcolm Gladwell's podcast. And we also continued it when we talked about Sound City, the documentary by Dave Grohl about the NAF console from Sound City recording studios, which is kind of cool because that's kind of a connection to Andrew does analog recording as well. And so some of those same sort of ideas that talking about analog and digital sort of conflict in Sound City, you kind of hear some of those things now when we're talking about with Andrew in this episode. So you'll hear some of that. You hear something has a kind of a holistic approach to teaching, and I'll let him talk about it later in the episode. I'm just really excited to, one, continue the Create series, two, get an opportunity to talk to Andrew and just hear about the evolution of Tweed Recording Audio Production School, and then just also to then excited to share it with you all. And that's the whole point, is that we're sharing things in order to figure out how to teach better. Because again, the purpose of the Amadon Planet podcast is to lead people to love others through teaching. And I think that happens here. So no further delay. Here is my conversation with Andrew Ratcliffe, CEO of Tweed Recording Audio Production School from Athens, Georgia. Andrew Ratcliffe, thank you so much for joining me on the Amadon Planet podcast. You are the CEO of Tweed Recording Audio Production School. And I've known you for a little bit, but it's exciting to see the things happen in your life. Welcome. How are you?
I'm good, Joel. Thank you for being here or having me here, man. This is it's exciting. I think this is actually the first podcast I've done with someone else being the host. So I'm excited about this. Usually I've had to host and ask all the questions. So I'm excited to answer your questions today, but we're good, man. Here in Athens, family's good. The Tweed family seems to be doing well, and just trying to find new ways to engage the world and hopefully try and leave it a better place.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, and I've known you, we went to church together here in Oxford, Mississippi, known you and your family for a while, but I'm curious, and I don't, never got the, hey, let's go to a coffee shop, sit down and get a little bit of background. So I wonder if you could share a little bit of background of you and your history in the recording industry.
Yeah, sure. I apologize. We should have done the coffee. I think we were actually having a conversation about that as I was trying to get the school up and going in Oxford and trying to pick your brain about how I could teach some things. So,
well, we both had kids on either side and trying to have these conversations, and it happens. So it's all good.
No doubt. So a little background on me: grew up in Roswell, Georgia, right outside of Atlanta. Pops, mom and dad are from South Georgia. So dad started working with a power company a couple years before I was born. So I lived the first 10 years in Atlanta, then moved to Birmingham, Alabama for 5. He was traveling all within the power company, Georgia Power, Alabama Power, Mississippi Power, and and then ultimately Southern Company. So 5 years in Birmingham, then down to Gulfport, Mississippi. I had a pretty lucrative high school basketball career. Had an opportunity to maybe play some in college, tore my knee to shreds my senior year.
Ooh.
Ended up going to Oxford, Mississippi because all of my friends at the time were kind of going there, and went to Oxford, started school at Ole Miss, started a band, started playing in a couple of different bands, played in a band in high school, started playing drums when I was 10, and got to Oxford, and the University of Mississippi kind of took a back seat, and I was politely asked to leave with a not so, I think a .08 grade point average. Not because I was stupid, because started touring the country and playing rock and roll music, and
Wow.
turns out you kind of have to go to class to
Yeah.
to pass college. So I'll go ahead and preface that I'm starting an educational facility and I failed out of college. So there you go. So that's kind of the plan of how I got to Oxford. Was there for 24 years and ran a recording studio, played in several different regional and national bands as a drummer, and got to tour all over the country. And then through a series of events, I can say this because you understand, God led me to do this in Athens instead of Mississippi. That's where he wanted me to start. So that's where we started it. So audio production school here.
There you go. Well, just curious, because I got to know, so what kind of music were you playing when you were touring and not going to class at Ole Miss?
Yeah, so played with probably a dozen different bands. Had an opportunity to play with Blue Mountain for a little while, do a couple of shows locally. Play with a band out of Brooklyn called the Damn Wells for a couple of shows. Another singer-songwriter, still one of my favorites, Sanders Bulkey out of Sardis, Oxford. Did some big shows with him, with opening up for bands like The Fray and Jason Mraz and Badly Drawn Boys. So that was a lot of fun. And then a lot of local bands that I just really enjoyed being around. And I think with Alex with the Damwells, they opened up for us at Proud Larry's. Was playing with a band called Always Sunday, which was me and Wynn McElroy and Dean and Trent Dabbs out of who's now in Nashville, and they opened up for us one night, and we had a really good band. They had a much better band and blew us off the stage. Finally, I just kept bugging Alex, and I was like, "Man, you need to do the record. You need to come do a record." Finally, just said, "Dude, if you'll stop calling me, I'll come do a record." I managed to kind of get myself into that band doing a record with them, just because their drummer was in New York and not available. Had gone on to other things, so a lot of different stuff. Mainly singer-songwriter, rock and roll, Americana, whatever the border is or label that the kids are calling it these days.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, my midlife crisis has been vinyl, which is probably as safe of a midlife crisis as you could be. And so we were talking about the Beatles, and is that rock and roll, or is this, is Sturgill Simpson, and what is that? And trying to it's just good music. There's a lot of good music out there.
Why do we need to label it? We had a conversation about the comeback of vinyl yesterday, and that's exciting, as a musician to see people being excited about sitting down with a piece of art. Because if you go back, that's what the vinyl was supposed to be, is here's the artwork that goes with the idea that I had for making the record, and open it up and sit down and experience something for 22 or 44 minutes at a time. So it's exciting.
No, it's awesome. So my word, and I kind of put this in the email asking you to come on, was my word for 2020 has been this word create. I got really inspired by listening to the Broken Record podcast from Rick Rubin and Malcolm Gladwell, just diving into some folks that I had some loose connections, very loose connections. So Bon Iver, he's he recorded for Emma Forever Ago. I forget the actual album. Anyway, miles from where I grew up, right? And then even the Black Keys, who their second and third album came from Fat Possum, which is from Oxford, Mississippi, which is It's great. And
Yeah.
so like hearing some of these like stories of creation and thinking about how do we tap into that? Because I think a lot of times in teaching, and like teaching from my perspective from, you know, in the schools and teaching math teachers, like sometimes it gets this formulaic sort of thing and like this, but the creativity side, the creative side is like something that just wanted to get into. So like wanting to connect with you and other folks in the creative arts, and thinking about how do we tap into that innovation to fuel our teaching. But then little did I know that we'd be on, you know, in the verge of a global pandemic, and we really need to be creative in our teaching, right? And thinking about that. So yeah, so that's kind of the motivation. So how did Tweed Recording School come to be?
Someone made a great point to me one day, and I realized that, you know, we had built a building in Oxford that was about 2,000 square feet. It's a great building. You know, when I started the studio, I had the wherewithal and the people around me, and even my dad, to say, hey, you know, you need to set up, you know, you need to look at this in limited liability corporations. The Tweed recording is one thing, it's a studio. You need to have an equipment company that houses all the equipment so that you can, you know, so that, you know, for liability standpoints and all that, you know, you have different businesses. It's just a smart way to do business and to be able to, you know, organize everything from a tax standpoint. So, you know, I got to the point where, you know, there's only so many people that you could fit into a room. And
Yeah.
so somebody said to me one day, you know, you've got a major league studio in a minor league building.
Yeah.
And it dawned on me, it's like, whoa, you're right. And, you know, if you have, you know, us weirdo musician guys and studio guys, you know, you always kind of draw your dream studio. You know,
Mm-hmm.
what would you do if you had an endless bank account? And, you know, during that time, you know, people aren't really building these kind of temples of sound, as I like to call them, places like Abbey Road and Sunset Sound and all that, because the record industry has changed. The budget isn't really there anymore. So, um, having the heart that I did, to kind of this mantra that, you know, to always give back, and none of this belongs to me. It's on lease from the man above. And I went,
Yeah.
okay, well, I want to build this massive studio. What are some things I can do to help subsidize it? And immediately it went, okay, well, let's build a building next to it that we can teach people how to make records and how to place a microphone in front of something and how to, you know, be a part of the creative economy and how to know what you should say when a record label calls you and says, well, you know, we want to sign you and we want all this, and you have the ability to say, no, this is what we're going to do because it's my intellectual property, my creativity. And in this day and age, I might not necessarily need a record label to do that. If I have, you know, if I take the route like, you know, Ben Harper or something like that, to where you know, you get on the road for 13 years, or, you know, another band like American Aquarium, where, you know, what the answer to that question from a record label needs to be, no, what can you do for me? Not what can I do for you? Because I've already built my fan base.
Yeah.
What do you help me with? So that's really how the school came about. And it just kind of got really big, man, bigger than I could ever imagine. And people started coming to the table and going, hey, man, I remember hanging out with you or being a part of something, or I know someone that mentored you. And just, you know, I looked up and I went, wow, man, there's over 250 years of experience now between all these people that are working with me, that are, I mean, have worked with everybody from Bruno Mars to Ornette Coleman to Etta James to the Black Crowes, to just, you know, there are no coincidences, man. When you get good people around and you remember where it all comes from and you let go of it, it can get pretty big and pretty powerful in a good way. So that's
Yeah.
really how school came about.
Well, and for those that we'll put in the show notes links to your website, and like there's pretty cool drone kind of view of going through Athens, but then looking for that through the school and all the different rooms. It's like, it's a beautiful place. And I mean, watching through Instagram as like everything was coming together, it's like, wow, this is going to be an amazing space to work in. What were some like ideas around that? Like, what led to like how you designed the space in order to kind of tap into this idea of collaboration?
Yeah, so I had an idea that I was just going to come into Athens and do the same thing I was doing in Oxford. I'm going to go find a 60-acre parcel, 10 minutes from downtown. And the problem with that is that there is a railroad that has been here forever in Athens that runs around the city. And building a recording studio next to a train track is extremely expensive. It
That's
can be
right.
done, but it's you almost double the cost with isolation and buildings within buildings. So had a gentleman here by the name of David Dwyer that was is now working with Tweed full time that said, "Hey man, I want to show you something that he was a real estate guy. He said there's a building downtown that's literally a drumstick throw away from Georgia Theater. I mean, it's 4 doors down from the Georgia Theater. And as we're looking at this building, it was it's about about a 9,000 square foot spot. All of a sudden, I mean, literally the next day, the building next to this one goes for sale, and you just went, okay, I'm listening.
Yeah, yeah.
And so what you have is a full city block that that is in the heart of downtown that has every amenity that a student can imagine. So, this beautiful 125-year-old building smack dab in the middle of downtown becomes available. In the back half of Washington Street, there are two buildings that are joined together that are about 6,000 square feet.
Mm-hmm.
And then the front half of the building is an upstairs and downstairs that's on the busiest city in Athens, which is Clayton, and it's upstairs and downstairs. So, it just so happened that the two studios that are in the back of that building are mirror images of what I built in Oxford. It's something that I worked in for 20 years, and it just so happened to fit in that space, which is really weird sometimes because if you're in that room, you walk out and you go, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where's the bunker room? Where's the kitchen? I got to go upstairs for that. So, so there's that half of it, and it just kind of fit, man. It worked. And then the upstairs of Clayton is faculty and kind of a lounge area where we can kind of decompress, and a student can, under supervision, can come and have a meeting or do tutoring or whatever else. And then the front half of the building was a really neat space. It was a shoe store called Lamar Lewis Shoes that was started back in the 50s, and it was a community space. I mean, it's where everybody came to buy shoes, in downtown Athens. And so I said to myself, we need to find a way to still engage and still allow this to be a community offering. So immediately it was like, well, it's a venue. It's going to be a live. Yeah. It'll be a place that is very intimate, that is unlike any other place, because we actually have 3 recording studios behind it that you can pipe the feed back to. And if you want to come in and do a live recording and record it all to 2-inch tape, we can do that. There's not a lot of places you can do that. So, this overwhelming movement of, let's, to use your word again, create, which is kind of part of our mantra, which is create, produce, record. You can come into this space, any type of music, any type of art form. And, one day it can be a art gallery. The next day it can be a punk venue. It can be a poetry venue. It can be a place if you want to do a nice PowerPoint presentation. So all things that are, creatives.
Yeah. Well, and so the Lewis Room is that space, and it's gorgeous, but then 2, just like, like the other thing you're creating is still creating community. It was a community space, and like now let's still tap into that history.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just to make sure that people have context. So at Tweed recording school, what are you teaching? What are you teaching? Let's just put it that way.
So we put together a 18-week, 500 plus contact hour curriculum that is it's intense. I mean, it's I believe that if you're going to enter into the industry, whether that be film, especially music, that you've got to be prepared for a 15-hour day. I mean, that's just the way it rolls. Especially in the beginning. I mean, I think when you get into it and you get yourself established, you kind of got to go, I'm not made of rubber. I'm not invincible. And I can't put my ears through this pressure for more than 8 to 10 hours a day. I'll take years off my life. So teaching all things sound, all things placing a microphone in front of something. And then, within that program, there's an internship program. There's also a life lessons class that, we care a lot about what is going to walk out of the door when we're finished on those 18 weeks. And it's a family. It's kind of this cool fraternal thing that, hey man, a lot of us have got a lot of experience in good things and bad things that maybe you should or shouldn't be doing. And, if we can help steer a young person or anyone into that or out of something that they shouldn't be in, that's a big part of what we're doing. And, we have not, I get the question all the time, well, are you partnering with UGA? Are you going to be accredited? No, I don't, not right now. I don't have any desire to do that, because I think there's things that happen when you do that, my dad says a great analogy of dancing with the elephant. I mean, we're going to go fast. And, this industry is, you don't get a trophy for just showing up. I mean, you gotta find a way to be competitive, and, we're going to hurt your feelings, because that happens in music, and how you deal with, everybody can go in, and I think this is a great way to sum it up, Joel, is everybody can learn how to operate equipment. And, you can be the best engineer in the world when it comes to creating and capturing the sonics of it. But if you're not a people person and a psychiatrist, you're not going to work in this industry. If you don't know how to take a person at their best and at their worst, and then 5 people that are experiencing all of that at the same time, put them together and make that record that you sit on your couch and listen to, that's the game, man. That is what you got to teach. So that really is, and then the business of it, like I said, that we have a very strong, John Snyder, our president from Loyola, John's recorded over 400 jazz records. He's worked everywhere from, under Creed Taylor to A&M to Jerry Wexler, Ahmet Ergen. He's managed Etta James, Ornette Coleman. It's about empowering a young person to know about the intellectual property rights, the creativity, what you're entitled to when you create a piece of music.
There's so many different aspects of the bit that you just shared. Even just the, the life side of it, like, hey, yeah, we're going to teach you the technical, but like, hey, if you're not in a good place to actually do that technical stuff, like you're not going to be, or even to the business side of it, like it's a holistic, like, it seems like a holistic approach to this business.
Is. Very much so, because most bands don't think about it. And I didn't. I was luckily, down the line, I think because I owned a recording studio, and back to the LLC comment, most kids don't think about when, if a band sits down in a room together for the first time and says, okay, well, let's write a song. They don't think about, well, who owns the song and what happens if this thing gets big. So a lot of times, I got 24 years worth of music and hard drives that is wonderfully music that I'll put up against, a lot of different bands that should be household names, but because they were not told and didn't have the conversation to sit down and go, hey guys, this is how we need to structure this. This is how we need to put it together so that we can all profit of it. They just end up hating each other in the process and just walk away from the band and quit. We've lost so many good bands to that. So that's another thing we're trying to kind of create.
Wow. This gets me so many different ways of thinking, but I'm just thinking, like, from my own perspective, like how, thinking about some of the things that we could be doing, in teaching teachers, and thinking of our own program here and at University of Mississippi. And like, we talk about some of the social emotional health, especially, now, like this last semester, I just saw so many folks that, when their calendar kind of got cleared out because nobody was having, like, hey, an hour and a half of Zoom calls every day for for all their classes and things like that, or and thinking about the teachers that are dealing with students, like, people didn't know how to handle their time. And if they didn't have that structure in place, how do they put something else in place that helps them stay healthy so that they could then do the work of being a teacher? And it's like that holistic approach is pretty beneficial.
Well, yeah, it has to be. I think that's the thing that, I built this incredible 12,000 square foot building that was designed to be different than everything else, not only from the holistic approach, but for the fact of, hey, come in and put your hands on everything.
Yeah.
I want you to experience what a 1950, E027 tube mic sounds like. I want you to experience, a real piece of analog gear versus the plug-in. And now, the world has changed. And how do you create online opportunities? How do you create, it's extremely difficult to do. But I think the thing that's most important, the fabric of that, is just what you said and what we're talking about from the holistic approach, is it's the people. It is the willingness to engage a young person, or anyone for that matter. And, I asked my dad one time, I said, he started off at a power company, in fossil fuels, and retired as a CEO of Southern Company.
Yeah.
Had an incredible career. And I asked him one time, I said, what's the most important thing you learned? If you're going to tell me one thing out of it, what is it? And he said, you need to learn to listen, and listen to someone, and don't try to formulate the answer in your head while you're listening, because it's this primal thing that we all have, that we want to go ahead and we want to jump right on it the second it comes out of your mouth. It's okay to say, I don't know, or I don't have the answer, or, hey, you know what? I need to process that. Give me a few minutes. So I think that's kind of what, man, we need a lot more of that, more so than anything in the world right now.
Yeah. I mean, before you got on, I was working on a presentation, and it's like, that's like the big aha that I had over all my sabbatical was like, listen, so it's good, but that's good coming from your dad.
Not everybody wants to listen.
Yeah. Well, okay. So how do you, that kind of leads me into this sort of thing. How do you balance the teaching? So like you kind of got into a little bit teaching the technical side, but then also encouraging the creative side. It seems like what you're teaching is someone that's sitting in between these two spaces of, I got to make sure to capture this, but I also got to help facilitate what's happening with actually the creation of the sound.
Yeah, the process of it is, it's pretty beautiful how we've kind of laid it out, of what you'll be doing over an 18-week time frame, and it's all intertwined. It goes back to that first moment of, hey, if we're a band and we're getting together, or if I'm producing or engineering someone, it's a conversation that happens throughout the 18 weeks, not unlike what making a record is about. I mean, so many people don't understand that process and how it all happens, and what you have to do to make a vinyl record that you get to sit on the couch and listen to. And I think if people did, anyone that's ever been in the studio that has never been a part of the recording process and has never seen it before, has walked away with this kind of like, oh, wow moment, that like, I had no idea that's what happens. I mean, perfect case in point, I got to a point where in Oxford, in the studio, I can make a 10-song record. I would sit down with a band and say, okay, have you done your pre-production? Have you done the work before you're supposed to get here? Have you got the song structures laid out? Don't get married to them, because that's the beautiful thing about being in the studio and getting creative and being in this building, is it can change. So, and then and bring me 2 extra songs just in case. And, you start into this process, and everybody gets there, and it starts firing on all cylinders. And, it's not unlike the curriculum we put together is not unlike that process. It's, that 10-song record, I got to the point where I could pretty much have everyone show up, set up the session, record the session, mix the session, and turn it back over to them in about 250 to 275 hours. So, for 40 minutes of music, there's somewhere around 200 to 400 hours that are put into it. And a lot of the, when people realize that, I think they're a lot more happy to give somebody $25 for that's really the heart of what I think the curriculum is to let people know that, hey, there's a lot of things that you can do within the industry to make a living. That's the goal, is that we create a new economy of the next people that are up and coming, because I think you need to know the history of how you got from the very first recording to where we are now, because if you have all those tools, and at any given moment, you're able to conquer what's in front of you and what the artist wants.
Yeah, we had just had I was doing a book club with somebody that was she's a math teacher educator out of Delaware. And she's doing this thing called she had this idea of a rough draft math and just basically bringing the idea of rough drafts into the math classroom. So you have these um, unfinished thinking that you're presenting to the class, like basically acknowledge like, this is a rough draft, this is unfinished. This is my thinking so far, and being able to take it and everyone's creating together. But it's this idea that you're kind of open-handed with it. Like, this isn't finished. I'm not protecting it. This is open-handed. Like, hey, here it is. I'm not going to have this, like you said, be willing to, not married to it, be willing to change and adapt, but thinking about like how, as a community within the person recording, the band that's creating, like doing everything to make it to its best possible form they can get before you saying, hey, this is it. This is it.
Yeah.
What are some, well, I'm just curious because I saw this on I think a Sonic Highways or something. So the Foo Fighters recorded in all those different places. I think this one was in Chicago.
Great series. I watched it. It's awesome. It's really cool.
So there's one instance where someone is plugging in the guitar and everything's live, and it made this like gnarly sound as they're plugging in the guitar, and all of a sudden they're just like, it sounded kind of cool. I mean, it's probably like the worst, like from the technical side, like you don't do that, like, turn it off so it doesn't make this nasty sound. But then all of a sudden they're like, hey, that's cool.
Speakers out. Yeah.
And they put it in the album. They like, okay, we got to capture that. Like, it seemed like that was on this side of like, hey, technically that was a bad thing to do, but then creatively that was something to do. So like, do you have anything like that? Any stories like that where there's like, this is kind of a mistake, but let's use that? Do you have anything like that?
Yeah. I mean, I have so many different stories. I mean, it's, at the end of the day, when you're shutting down the session, you often, whatever you've been working on that day, you make a final mix or a rough mix of what you've been working on to reference, because you're going to the next song the next morning. Mm-hmm. When you get to that final kind of process. And a lot of times what happens is, and I think this is a disconnect from what kids don't understand when they're sitting in front of a laptop and they're creating music. A lot of times what happens is when I got back to the time where it came to mix the record, and this is kind of a metaphor for the session itself, is you get down, you get everything cleared out, you get the desk in front of you, get everything on the desk back to what we call unity and ready to go. Everything's at kind of line level, and you start mixing your drums, you bring the bass in, you kind of start forming this thing, and then you go, okay, well, that's pretty good. And then you listen to it and go, wait a minute, that's not as good as what I did 2 weeks ago in the moment. So that's another idea that you got to be prepared for, is that, there's something about being in the moment. I had, in being involved with this company called Sound Techniques that's building some really cool consoles that haven't been built in 41 years. And they're a really incredible piece of audio history. They were used to record, George Harrison's All Things Must Pass, David Bowie's first 5 records. So within that journey, I got to hang out with a gentleman by the name of Ken Scott. Ken's a producer engineer that worked on a little record called The White Album. He did Bowie's first 4 records.
Yeah.
Just having a conversation with him and picking his brain and going, there's like David Bowie, for example. David Bowie hated to do second vocal takes. He just didn't want to do it. He was very much in the moment. I think Robert Plant was the same way from Led Zeppelin, that, hey, I'm going to give you everything that I possibly can during this 3 minutes. And if it's not good enough for you, then sorry, go find somebody else. There's those moments. I mean, there's been moments that I remember one particular record I was working on where, it was 2:00 in the morning and it was past time for everybody to be recording, worn out. And it was Patrick McCleary and Eric Carlton. It was a record that we were doing with a band called the Minor Adjustments, which was kind of this all-star group of musician guys in Oxford. And Patrick's like, man, let's just get this idea down real quick. I'm going to sit down at the piano with an acoustic guitar, just put a mic up for reference. Carlton's going to play the piano to it. And, it ended up being this completely magical thing that's on the record.
Awesome. Oh,
The song's
that's cool.
called Pieces of You, and it's on a record called By the Minor Adjustments. And it's just this magical thing that happened at 2:00 in the morning that there's no possible way if you sat down and said, I'm going to recreate this. So this is how the song should be.
Yeah.
You didn't know it was happening in the moment, but the moment happened and it passed you by and you caught it. So that's another thing. You always be ready to record, even when you're not ready to record.
That was a cool thing about the that Broken Record podcast with Rick Rubin and the Black Keys, and he played Pat Carney played like the first recording they ever had, and it was like, and Rick Rubin just starts laughing. He's like, that could have been last night. It's like, it's great. Like this, like beautiful, like capturing of like them just jamming. And it was just beautiful. So it's like in the moment, there's something there.
You look at bands like one of my favorite bands, Guided by Voices. I mean, Robert Pollard is just an incredible force of a songwriter. I mean, there's kind of an underlying joke between all the musicians. And I'm talking about heavy hitting musicians that he's kind of holds the Guinness Book of World Records for the most songs written. And he can I'll go in the bathroom and sit down on the toilet and write 7 songs and 4 of them are, So, I mean, he wrote a record that he did. It's called Suitcase, and it's 100 songs that he wrote.
Oh gosh.
100 different bands. So wow. The song written is, well, this is what, this band would sound like. This is their name. So he went in and wrote this record. It's incredible. And most of that stuff is done on a 4-track in his basement. And some of it's just out of tune guitar, but it doesn't matter because it's a beautiful melody and it just grabs you. It's capture it. So
that's awesome. That's great. And I know like in the video you that's showing your school, you show all these like this console, and it's just like, it's like a wall. It looks like a wall of history, all these little components that are from all these different things. And so the fact that everyone gets to, or the folks get an opportunity to play with those things is just, I can't imagine that. That's got to be to touch history, basically. Yeah. So what are some your key learnings or lessons that you've had since you started this? Because I know, I mean, again, back to our conversations with kids hanging around trying to talk about what you're going to be doing, but then you must have a list. But what are some key ones that you've had, some learnings or some lessons?
I go back to the listening thing. I go back to surrounding myself with good people in this organization, people that care about other people more than themselves. We fail miserably at that every day, but as long as we're trying, that's what's most important. I think, I come from a world that is that's more analog based, and it's a different process of recording. In the past 4 months with the situation that we're in, I've been challenged to learn a lot more about, kicking and screaming into the digital realm of recording, and learning things like Pro Tools. I never ran a Pro Tools studio. Just the 2 times that I tried to implement it failed miserably. So trying to go back in those things and not be a dinosaur, I guess, is be willing to learn new ways and not be stuck in the mud. I mean, you got to adapt. I think that's know your history and know where you came from, but don't be scared to rewrite it, and the good and the bad. So and learning how to to be around artists and to be a music lover and not and kind of guard yourself in that, because real quick, music has the power to, I mean, it's the one thing that I think everybody in the world can agree on in some way, shape, or form. I mean, I think you can find one record that every walk of life can enjoy and listen to. I think just I guess the term, not marrying the artist as much as you want to. Sometimes in the beginning, took a chance on things and learned that okay, here's a way that I can make the next relationship better, or the next record better. And if you get in the studio and it's not fun anymore, then what's the point of doing it?
Right.
And I really have, in the past 4 months, it's been fun for me because I told somebody this the other day on a podcast that I was doing, and I said, this pandemic that we're going through has actually made me feel more normal than I have in a long time, because it's been a year and a half since I've done a full record, or 2 years almost. And, that's pandemic is kind of what you need to be built for to do a record. I mean, it's this, we're all going to collapse in on ourselves, and we're going to get, spend 4 to 6 weeks on a record. And then we're going to come up for air and see our families and our friends. And I'm going to go right back in it again. I'm going to take 3 or 4 days off, recalibrate, and go right back in. So, this is kind of normal. Being a politician the past 2 years has been strange. So, learning how to that I did leave breadcrumbs. I know how to get back to it. So
That's right. That's good.
I do know how to make a record. We did a Future Birds thing a couple of weeks ago. I was like, man, I still know how to do this. This is good.
That's awesome. More. Yeah. No, yeah. And so last couple podcasts I've been thinking about, I just did some things on reflecting. I talked to like my grad assistant from this past year, because, we taught every class together. And then I talked to a student I had 10 years ago, and he's now a practicing math teacher. And just having that opportunity to reflect, like things that I should be doing, like reflecting, like really thinking about practice and looking at some of those lessons learned. And it's like, like you need a silver lining of a global pandemic is getting that time to really do that sort of work that's necessary,
Yeah, it's the one thing that I think, whether you're a believer or non-believer, that everybody always says, man, I need more time. I need more time in the day. I need more time to do this. Be careful what you ask for.
Yeah, here you go. I love that. I mean, I also love the, your parallel of going from analog and digital. I mean, you have a lot of teachers, same thing, where, hey, I need face-to-face. Well, you got to think of some other way. You got to look at some other tools. So we're all doing that.
Yeah.
So, as a teacher, we think about problems of practice and like, thinking like, what's the next thing I need to work on? What are some things that I'm questioning? So what are some areas of learning that you are seeking to fill, or what are some key questions you still have as you go into this, as you assuming this teaching role?
Yeah. It's been, I've been very fortunate to have John Snyder, who is an academic, he ran music program at Loyola. Actually, he birthed it and then ran it for 12 years, and then saw something in me and what we were doing that he left Loyola and came here. And he really has just this incredible mind that I go back to. There's a lot of things in life that you can do that are just like producing a record. And I think what I've learned is how to structure what I've done in my career and how to lay it out into a teaching format. It's like the first time I sat down with John and said, well, here are my points that I want to teach in this school. And here are my notes on it. And he just kind of laughed, and he's like, this is kind of a big steaming pile of manure, but I'm going to help. You're not an academic, and that's okay. Let me help you through that. So, learning that process, and I guess in a way, he kind of went back and empowered me and said, Andrew, you've been teaching all the way through. I mean, you've been,
right.
You've been showing someone how to get the best out of their playing, and here's how you can do it in a formal setting, and learning how to do that more efficiently, and then how to put it on paper, because that's really, I mean, everybody thinks, oh yeah, man, and you as an academic, I'm sure would. When I sat down and went, that's one of the things I wanted to reach out to you about, is how do I do this? How do I put words on paper? Because anybody can talk, and anybody can go and do something, and I can go and make a record, but putting it down on paper and making it a class, man, that's an art form. And I commend you for your ability to do that, because luckily John had come around, and we got another guy named Charlie Chastain that's just joined on to the force, and Nate Nelson, that collectively, man, it's pretty powerful. So those are the things that I think I'm learning how to get better at. And then, just like I said, how do we take this building, if it comes to it? I mean, we're gonna, it was never, I mean, it's purpose built in the sense that it's for 24 people, very intimate. And we're going to be even more careful and say, let's just do 12 starting in August, if the world doesn't cave in on us. and spread everybody out and make it even more intimate. So it's going to be a pretty incredible experience for a person to come and do that, and just navigating that. If we get into it, like I told everybody the other day, I think the whole world is racing to how do we present something that is not laughable as a online learning.
Mm-hmm.
And my brain says, well, you just can't do that with what we're trying to do at Tweed. So
Right.
my process right now is going, okay, if we're in this process and we start in August and all of a sudden the fire alarm goes off in the first week of October and this thing comes back around on us with teeth, then what are we going to do as an organization to make sure that the people that are in those seats, that we deliver what we say we're going to deliver?
Right.
So that's what we're working on, or I'm working on personally right now with my team, is that how do you do that?
Actually, that's kind of exactly what we're working on at the university. We're talking about this idea of resilient teaching, right? So if the modality changes, how does it make it so that we're not doing what we did in the spring, where we have to take a week off to refigure out our entire curriculum? But resilient teaching would be, hey, the modality might change, but you're still going to see the same core thing. Yes, there'll be some adjustments, but now because our teaching is more resilient, we can pay more attention to the students. And again, making sure, just like you said, making sure we're delivering what we're supposed to. So lots of people are thinking about that because even too, we have to be in a place where if, let's just say 1 year's, a student gets a positive, diagnosis and maybe has been away for the week or whatever, and is like, okay, they're isolated. Well, how do you still have a hybrid experience where, they can't be there, but everyone else can, so lots of, those are my key questions that I'm thinking about.
It goes back to kind of making a record too in the analog versus digital thing, because I think what I'm seeing and paying attention to what, places like, the larger universities that you're in is, you've got a group of people that are kind of like me. They're the analog guys.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know how to turn the computer on and go through that. And the young people that do, you got to sit down and have a conversation and be willing to explore your options to make what's best for the person that's sitting in front of you that you need to teach.
Yeah. Well, and if anyone, again, going back to your video, I think seeing the classroom setups that you have, I mean, it is definitely about, you're seeing learning as doing. Like, this is not a, hey, I'm going to lecture up here. There's one space where I'm going to, show you what to do. I always say it's like when I hear about some education programs where they lecture to you about not lecturing, like, be active and but it's a PowerPoint and you're just sitting there taking it in, but it's actually about engaging in the doing of it. And it's like, it's so like, there's so many, like the big lab space where everyone has all the tools available in front of them. It's like, I mean, I'm seeing that as a very big positive, like that this is about learning, doing, we're doing the work, we're engaging in that process.
Yeah, you're about to drink from the fire hose. I mean, but and during that 18-week process too, I mean, we had 3 weeks built into that process too as internships. And now that the world has kind of changed, especially in the music industry, those opportunities aren't there as much. So we've kind of said, well, what are we going to do inside the building? And that's going to be, you're going to get to spend time with a real band during those 3 weeks and working on a real commercial recording that when you leave this place, you'll have credits on a record before you even start your career.
Nice. Beautiful. So I know I'm just wrapping up here. Thank you again for your time. But I had this question. I popped it to you before we started recording. But any tips? So again, we've got some analog folks that are jumping on computers now that are having to do some online teaching. Any tips on having some good sound for? Because I don't think there's anything worse than an echoing teacher or anything like that. Like, how do we help our teachers out? Any tips that you have for them doing something like this?
Yeah, I mean, you can reach out to us personally if you like. We've got a lot of people that are versed in that. But as far as the gear goes, I mean, there's a lot of great information. There's too much information at times out there. But I think if you can go to places, brokers and gear places like that, places like Sweetwater, and there's a lot of online tutorials that can help you with that. You can check us out at tweedrecording.com, like I said, and feel free to ask us any questions. That's what we're here for. We're helping a lot of people with that are we've gotten a plethora of people that have said, how, I want to learn how to do podcasts. We're going to teach that during the curriculum, and really anything that has to do with placing a microphone in front of it. So a lot of great online tutorials. And then we've got, specific people that you've got resources in Oxford, like people like Dave Wilworth at RWA Consultants, who's an acoustic guy that if someone says, well, I got to set up my podcast room next to my HVAC unit, how do I,
Yeah.
things like that. So, tips and tricks. I think those are, there's a lot of good information out there, a lot of good people willing to help. So,
Yeah. Or setting up in a closet that's in the garage. That's what this space.
Yeah, man. Come on. I started Tweed recording in a house in College Hill Heights, and it was a 4-track cassette machine, 2 of them linked together with mattresses on the wall in the living room in a 70s style ranch house.
There you go.
Got to start somewhere, man.
Yeah.
Don't be scared to say, what's the old the old Confucius, was it, he who asks a question is a fool for 5 minutes, he who doesn't is a fool forever.
There you go.
Sticking with it. There you go.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for your time, Andrew. I know, obviously we've got the Tweed Recording Audio Production School we can promote. And again, we'll put a link to it on the show notes. Anything else to promote? No, you got a podcast, right?
Yeah, Tweed Talks. It's, kind of doing the same thing is reaching back into the old catalog of of people that I've recorded, people that I've been around, had fun with. And so it's on all platforms as well, Tweed Talks. And then, everything else is sitting right there at Tweed Recording. And we got some really exciting things coming up from the Lewis Room in the fall. Got some really big bands that I can't quite talk about yet because the contract's not due, but got some heavy hitters coming in. It's going to be a lot of fun that people, I think, will be able to find a unique experience. Working on some really cool things with LED walls and how to bring people into the room for musicians. So if that's something that, a band is listening to and wants to maybe explore, check us out at tweedrecording.com. It's all there, man.
Awesome. That's great. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the time.
Yeah, Joel, thank you. And if there's anything we can do to help you guys out, let me know. And you guys stay safe and well, and we'll talk soon.
Big thank you to Andrew for sharing his expertise. Loved hearing the holistic approach to teaching that Tweed Recording School uses, and just even thinking about the whole person and thinking about how do we prepare somebody. And it kind of goes into this idea that I heard in a book recently, and I can't pull it, but thinking about the difference between a job, a career, and a calling. And I really feel like Andrew is called to create this school and trying to lead people down that path. This is not just a job. Right? This is a career, and if it could be a calling. And thinking about how do we do that and how do we do that well. And I love that the conversations that he's having with his students and that his instructors are having with his students leads them to a place where they're thinking about this whole journey of what does it mean to engage in this creative endeavor. And I think we as teachers have an opportunity to learn from that. And I'm excited that he got a chance to share a story, excited to see where Tweed Recording goes from here. So that's about all that I have for this episode of the Amazon Planet podcast. If you're looking for show notes, and then in the show notes, you'll see all the links to Tweed Recording Audio Production School. They've got a super cool tour of the facilities, which is kind of makes me a little bit jealous looking at that space to learn from. But you can find those show notes at amazonplanet.com/episode 27. If you're looking for ways to support the podcast, you can subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. You can also subscribe to the Amazon Planet download, where we're sending out resources for teaching and any updates from Amazon Planet. You can get that by going to amazonplanet.com, looking for the subscribe, the email button. They're all over on that front page. You can follow Amazon Planet on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, or like the Amazon Planet Facebook page. If you're listening to this podcast in July, we are hosting on the Amazon Planet Facebook page, we are hosting a book club on high school math lessons to explore, understand, and respond to social injustice. That's through another podcast I have, the At Teaching Math Teaching podcast that's sponsored by the Association of Mathematics Teacher Educators that I host with Ava Thanheiser and Dusty Jones. So we're doing a little book club there. So if you're into teaching high school mathematics, that could be something, or just teaching mathematics, or if you just get interested, what does it look like to teach math for social justice? Could be something check out there. You can also check out the Amadon Planet store or Amadon Planet Bookshop. Links are in the footer at AmadonPlanet.com, where your purchases support the production costs of the podcast. And in conclusion, thank you for listening to this episode of the Amadon Planet podcast. Thank you to Andrew for sharing his expertise in the story of the Tweed Recording Audio Production School. Thanks to Matt Mifflin for the music in this episode. And finally, thank you to all of you out there who are seeking to teach better and be the good in the world by investing in the lives of others. This world is a better place because you've decided to use the gifts you have been given to serve others. Thank you for all that you do. Peace.